Alright guys, welcome to part 2 of this week 4 lecture. As promised, we're talking a little more about credibility and making sure that we have a really strong ethos in our research and our argument. So there are a lot of ways that you can convey yourself as a credible source through your writing. Not only do you want to rely on experts in order, sorry if you hear my dog sighing. Not only do you want to rely on experts for your ethos, but you also want to build up your own ethos. So you can do this through word choice, spelling, making sure you're doing spell check, reading your essay out loud so that you can hear any problems with grammar or sentence structure. You can think about tone. You want to have an academic tone, nice and balanced, and not super emotional. You want to think about rhetorical devices and rhetorical appeals. Think about how are you constructing your argument? How are you treating audience objections? So thinking about the counter argument, what the other side might say back to you. Think about organization. Is your essay really nicely organized? And if you want to increase your essay's organization, you can look at the paragraph building PowerPoint that I put on Blackboard just as a review for people who feel like they need it. But that can be a really good way to increase your own credibility. You can also think about sources, how you use them, which we'll talk more about today. Design decisions. You need to make sure you're adhering to the genre conventions that I've set for you, which means APA style, which means Times New Roman font, 12 point, double space, black text. And all of those things can help you increase your credibility. You can also, as I said, use outside sources to boost your credibility, but only really if you do it right. So I've got an example here of a paragraph that there's something a little wrong with it. So I'll read it out loud for us. There are many negative issues that arise when the human lifespan is extended. One negative is that as people age, the quality of life drops and debilitating diseases are more likely to form. Although we live longer, we do not necessarily enjoy more years of health. For example, disability due to mental illnesses and sight and hearing loss are greatly affecting the quality of life for people as the human lifespan is increased, and so on and so forth. And we've got another quote in here that is just dropped in, which is what is wrong with this paragraph. We've got two quotes here that are just plopped in the middle of it. We don't have any citations, in-text citations at all to tell us where this quote is from. And also, we don't have any signal phrases to tell us who said these quotes and why they might be an expert. So, we're looking at this paragraph again. It's been slightly changed. Is it clear? What's still missing? So we've got the negative, quality of life drops, and debilitating diseases are more likely to form. Sarah Bosley, 2015, says that although we live longer, blah, 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 page 75. So now we know that the person who says this quote is Sarah Bosley. We have an in-text citation of the year and the page number, so it comes from a book. And we've got the same thing down here that tells us that Bosley is quoting Dr. Christopher Murray, and he's the one who says this quote. But there's still something missing from this paragraph. So let's look at this final version. Sarah Bosley, 2015, a health editor for The Guardian, says that although we now live longer, we do not necessarily enjoy more years of health. So now we know, not only did Sarah Bosley tell us this, we've got our in-text citation with the year, but also we know why she is an expert or why we should trust her. She's a health editor, which means she's a journalist who specifically studies and researches and writes about health issues for The Guardian, which is a credible, reputable news source. So that tells us exactly why we should trust her. And then we come down here, and she quotes Dr. Christopher Murray, as cited in Bosley 2015, director of the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation of the University of Washington. So we know exactly why he is a credible expert source as well. He's the director of this institute for the University of Washington. So we can also trust what he's saying. So anytime you use a source in your essay, you want to tell us why this source is credible, why it's reputable, why this person is an expert in whatever your topic is. So there are some other things as well that impact how credible you sound that I mentioned earlier that we're going to return to. So we're going to compare two paragraphs from two letters to a state representative after a hearing on animal cloning. So we're going to think about word choice and emotion and see how we might judge which letter might be taken more seriously by this state representative. All right, so letter 1. I am pleased to see among members of Congress great concern that humans should not be cloned. This is a belief that I too share. What perplexes me is the lack of protest against cloning animals. Repulsive, repugnant, offensive, scientists and politicians alike have used these words to describe human cloning experiments, but these adjectives should also be invoked to describe cloning experiments on animals. All right, so that was letter 1. Letter 2. I cannot believe you actually pretended to have a hearing on animal cloning and only invited people in favor of cloning. Why didn't you invite someone to speak for the animals? What a waste of our tax dollars. You should be passing laws against cloning instead of trying to justify it. All right, so there's a couple of reasons why letter 1 is more effective than letter 2. One reason is that we've got a more, or should I say less emotional language being used. We've got some quotes from scientists that increases credibility. They're talking about experts and what the experts believe. And we've also got a very high level of diction. So the word choice is more academic at a higher level. You think about maybe in the term of they're using dictionary level words here. Letter 2 is a lot more emotional. They're using exclamation points, which anytime you see that, you know it's not really academic in nature, very emotional. And they're also being they're putting the state representative that they're writing to on the defensive by using those questions like, why didn't you invite someone to speak for the animals? They're putting that audience on the defense. So that automatically is going to make someone you're arguing with hesitant to believe you because they feel like they're being attacked. And then they also use a less high level of diction or word choice. So you can see, I cannot believe you actually pretended. That kind of word choice there is a lower level than the first person's, who sounds more like an academic tone or essay. So as I said, the letter 1 shows more awareness of the audience of a state representative. Obviously, we don't want to have that representative feel like they're being attacked. We want to use some more high-level word choice and also outside sources to back up claims. And relying on experts rather than only your own opinion. All right, So when you're thinking about the audience of your paper, you should be thinking about their point of view on the problem, and how you can word that problem neutrally instead of creating that offense, defense, us versus them mentality. Think about what that person knows and what information you need to explain to them in more detail so that they understand your argument. Think about the level of diction or word choice, and what kind of familiarity you should write with. It's a good idea to use a higher level of word choice in an academic essay, especially at the college level. And then think about, too, what values or beliefs your audience you can use to appeal to those values or beliefs in order to convince your audience that your problem or issue is important, or maybe convince them of your stance on that issue. So don't only be thinking about logic and reason, but also values and beliefs, and ethos and pathos. Okay, so in order to get the full benefit from your sources, make sure you're explaining why they're credible, and boost your own credibility by thinking carefully about the language and tone that you use and the sorts of rhetorical appeals that you rely on. You don't want to be overly emotional. You don't want to sound too familiar, like you're talking to a friend in your essay, that sort of thing. Okay, so lastly, what I recommend that you do is open up your latest draft, or your first draft, second draft, whatever draft you're on, and highlight anytime you're using an outside source. So anytime you use your introduction to whatever source you're doing, highlight it in one color. Anytime you're quoting, paraphrasing, or summarizing your source, highlight that in a different color. And then in a third color, highlight all of your explanations that connect your source material to whatever argument you're making. This way you can see exactly how you're using your source material. Make sure after you've done this that you're citing all of your sources. You should have in-text citations for all of these things. You should be explaining why your sources are credible in a concise way. You should be making sure that you're using quotes, paraphrases, and summaries, not just quotes. And you should also be explaining what your source is saying and how it proves your point, not just plopping a quote in there and then never coming back to it. Okay, so that is the last thing there. What I recommend that you do before you get into the drafting process, or at this point, is look over the example essay that I've put on Blackboard, and also to look at the example outline that I've put on Blackboard. Otherwise, any questions you have, direct them to my email, and have a great week.